I am super stoked to have you, Heather Campbell, here with us today. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, but specifically something we're not going to read about you in your bio or on your website.
Oh man. Um, Something that you won't read about me. I'm a bit of a leaper. And what that means, I actually started a little program during COVID that I called the Leap Lab, where I brought a group of women together and we talked about what it means to leap. And I ran them through this whole program that I'd created. And looking back, my life often is a series of leaps, right? So even my decision to go to law school, I'd never thought about it. It just showed up and I leapt. I've got like times where I moved to London to work for the British government. Total leap. Yeah. And I had no housing set up. Like this was, kind of early web days. Like that dates me. No real like contacts there. It was a little bit crazy. And I ended up bumping into a friend at the Heathrow airport that was like, "What are you doing here?" I told her, "I moved here." And she's like, "Where are you living?" I'm like, "I don't know." She's like, "Here's some of my friends, call them." Anyway, so those are some of my favorite memories in life, those
Oh
leaps.
my
And there's a
goodness.
whole string of them, right?
Sounds like it. That's pretty big though, huge. You are a courageous woman to say the least if you're leaping like that.
It's the way I think for me, things are a clear yes or a clear no.
Mhm.
Like that whole, and I know people make decisions differently based on, personality, influences, etc. But for me, it's always been that like, I think I'm very good at listening to my gut instinct. And it is like clear yes or clear no. There's usually no in between.
I love that so much.
Mhm.
So I was doing a little like research on you, and a few things that I found on your site that I thought were pretty cool that really just aligned with me. And I was like, oh, we got to talk about these things. So the three things, there were several actually, but three things that really stood out is that you love saying I love you to your kids. And my kids are grown, like grown men with their own families. A couple, one of them has like two kids, and I still like text them at least twice a week, sometimes daily. It's like, hey, I love you. Hey, I love you. And I thought that was so powerful that you do
Mhm.
that. The second one is that you are just real, the power of just being real. And I love that. I love you're like, I don't give two flips about who really what they think about me. That was powerful. And then my favorite one, believe it or not, is the fact that coffee is your love language. Because it's totally my love language.
I
Yeah,
wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't. And guess what? I've just had to accept that it is. Like this morning, I do a kind of a like a drip. What's it called? I should
French
know the
press
name of
or
it. It's not
oh
French press. It's the carafe where you have
yes,
the filter and it just kind of
yeah.
percolates. Yep. But I walked in and the smell, and I was just like,
Wow.
yes,
That's morning. That's
it's the
morning for me. It's literally, it's like for me, it's like Jesus, coffee. Okay, I'll say my husband, Jesus, Roy, coffee.
there you go. Good correction. Good
Yeah.
correction.
I think those are so powerful. So I want to kind of dive in because you have such a unique spin on what you do because it's such a quote unquote serious subject. But I think that you do it in such a way based on what I've seen that's just very just relatable. Um, but I want to ask you, do you see yourself because you're an attorney? Do you see yourself also as a salesperson?
That's a great question. So, I mean, years ago, I remember sitting in a conference and which I am often like I'm one of those people I can't stop getting educated on different things, right? Can't stop, won't stop. It's one of my superpowers and honestly one of my problems. Like I'm an information hoarder, right? So sitting there and the person on stage, is talking to this whole audience, like, what business are you in? Right. And you hear all these different responses because people are talking back. I remember he was like, nope, you guys are all in sales and marketing, full stop. Sales
Yeah.
and marketing doing it, and I remember thinking, oh, this is fascinating. Like, of course, you know that when you really dig into business fundamentals, but so often we don't think of our business that way.
No. For sure.
Right. And for me, I would say my version of sales, because I've never been the, the hard pressure, twisting arms to talk people into things. But if there's something that I care about, I will talk about it all day long. That's
Yeah.
the problem, right? But it's human nature. If there is something that we care about, like my husband has said numerous times, oh, I could never do sales. I could, I just could never. And I was like, what are you talking about? If you get behind like sports equipment, if you get behind a sports team, if you get behind like an environmental issue, you will talk and talk and talk about it. That's sales, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Y-
I find it interesting because not everyone really gets that, and people
Mhm.
generally tend to feel like I don't do sales, I can't do sales. And I'm like, you already do. If you have a spouse, if you have children, if you've grown up, you know what I mean? If you have people in your life that you have to convince to do something or negotiate with in any way, shape, or form, you're already in sales. So as an attorney being in sales as well, how do you tend to attract new clients?
Oh, so my version of sales, I decided a long time ago that the traditional legal industry really does not work for most people. It doesn't work for the vast majority of consumers of legal services. It doesn't work, honestly, for a huge percentage of us who are in the legal industry as providers, right? So for me, I decided the biggest challenge that people have is getting inside of what I call the legal black box, right? It's a very high barrier to entry
Yeah.
to actually learn what it is that you need to learn to even be able to adequately assess a problem, right?
Mhm.
And so people stay stumped and they don't get the support that they need, or they knock on the wrong doors trying to get the support that they need, or what have you. And I just decided, like, you know what? There's a different model. And because I lived in the world of serving businesses and serving entrepreneurs, serving online businesses, and having been raised by a father who is very entrepreneurial, I just thought, like, I've much more had the approach of being a business person that just happens to be in law, right? Like, what can I do that sets me apart? What can I do that also changes the model for the
Yeah,
better? And
yeah.
for me, it was educate. It was give away, give away, give away the map to your legal needs in business, so that, because I'm also a big believer that we get to help create the kind of client that shows up to do business with us. Right.
Mm.
And how do you do that? You do that by giving people the right information so that they show up as that more strategic version of themselves, understanding what the next step is. And so my version of sales really looks like a lot of educating, a lot of giving, a lot of offering referrals if I'm not the person to actually provide the service. Right. And I'm just a believer that you do enough of that and plant seeds and grow the grass, it's gonna come back for you at some point.
Oh my God, you're my favorite. And I mean that because most people don't get it. Most people come into business thinking if I hustle hard enough, if I grind hard enough, if I ask enough, dialing for dollars, if I ask
Mm-mm.
enough people, somebody's going to say yes. But what about just building great relationships and being of service and making yourself a resource? And that's exactly what you're saying. Something that I've been just really meditating on is the power of, and this is something I think I've done from the very beginning, is being obsessed with helping your ideal client. So like you've
Mhm.
turned it on its head, and it's like, I'm going to be obsessed with the business and how business people operate. And then I'm going to figure out how do I serve them. And I just wonder, was that your initial, like, did you come in that way, or was that something you figured out along the way and just realized that you could be of that service and be able to help them better from this side of the court, if you will, than the other side? How
Mhm.
did that really click for you?
Yeah, so I think there were a couple of threads that started early for me, not only in law school. I mean, anybody who spends any time on my site or reads even my bio page, you'll learn that, my mom passed away while I was in law school, right? Actually, very near the start. And it dramatically changed my paradigm, not only for school, but for life. And so for me, and the other thing that I think was a little bit unique to my path is I had zero connections in the legal field. So even though I made the choice to go into law, I didn't know attorneys. We didn't have anybody in our family who were attorneys. I had no connections to the Seattle marketplace where I was. So it was a little bit having to build my practice from the ground up, because when I graduated law school, I decided I was not going to go do somebody else's work. I wanted to right away do work that I cared about, because I knew, having experienced the loss of my mom, there are no guarantees. And I just did not buy into the myth that you have to go kind of, like work for the man for many years doing work that you don't love just to get experience. When I knew, one, I'm a collector of people, and I could collect and nurture my own mentors who would help me and, be there for me, which is what I did. But also, as kind of an outside perspective coming into the legal industry, I could see right away in the beginning the parts that weren't working and how it didn't serve. And so, even though I didn't really come up with a solution until I had practiced enough years that I had the confidence to actually go create a different solution, right? I could always see it, and I still operated in a very unique way within the law. And so when I transitioned actually to creating my own virtual office, is when I also launched my second business, the Legal Website Warrior, which is essentially an alternative legal service provider model that provides, in my view, more accessible, more easily implemented legal support for small businesses who are often excluded from the marketplace.
Wow. Love that you see a need, you figured out how to fill it. I thought it was, I mean, when I say you were courageous earlier, I'm like, you started a whole a whole law firm right out of college, right out of law school. And, you're right. Most people feel like you have to take a certain path to be able to get there. What do you feel like entrepreneurs, small business owners need the most right now, and they don't realize they need it? And they could probably locate some of those things having a conversation with you. What do you think people are really missing right now when they're starting businesses?
Oh, are you saying from a legal perspective, what are they missing?
Yes.
Yeah. Often they're missing the map, right? I always start with the map. So regardless of, for any of us, what our business is, the thing that is going to attract people to you is what makes your perspective or your paradigm different than everybody else who does what you do, right?
Yeah.
And that's really what you're first selling people on, is here is the way that I view your problem, I view your business or whatever, and getting them to buy into that initial paradigm shift. So for me, that's always been, and it started because, when people would show up at my door with legal issues in their business, you get questions all over the place. What about this? What about IP? What about business contracts, business formation? A law overlapping business is a big arena. There's pretty much not anything you can do in business that does not touch the law.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the questions are multifaceted in every topic. And I remember thinking, I've got to create a way to simplify this for people. I've got to create a way where being in charge of solutions for your business feels more accessible. So that's the map that I created. It's called my 5-bucket framework for, business legal success. And I've given that away since I created it. And I teach on it. I can do a 10-minute presentation on it. I can do an hour-and-a-half presentation on it. Like, the map is the same. And honestly, when people come and, enroll in my services, it's always where we start. I walk them through that entire map so that I have a fundamental understanding of every part of their business, which will help me better serve them from the standpoint of efficiency, of risk analysis. Where do we start first, right? But the map is largely the same, whether you're just starting out, whether you're making millions of dollars a year because you are an established business. But so many businesses skip parts of that map, or they play catch up after they've been in business a while. So, you just meet people where they are, but I always start there.
I love that. And I will make sure that the website and everything is in the show notes, but say it real quick so that people will hear it. They can go get that map right now.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. You can find it. It's called the Legal Basics Boot Camp, right, for mission-driven entrepreneurs. And you can go to my site, which is just how it sounds, legalwebsitewarrior.com/legal basics boot camp. It's
Perfect.
free. You can get in, you can go through it multiple times. I've had lots of people, because you're going to go through it the first time and you're going to be like, oh, maybe I should do that one thing. I'm ready to implement that. And then as you build and grow, you're going to be ready for a few more of the next steps, right? So it's a tool that grows with you, because regardless of what level of business you're at, you're revisiting that
Yeah.
same analysis, that same map.
Wonderful. So everybody go get
Mhm.
that right now because you know you're going to need it. Let me ask you,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm wondering if you've ever encountered this or if it's really on the top of your head, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What problems or potential legal problems do sales people tend to get themselves into in making
Mhm.
promises and creating contracts and making offers and things of that nature? What comes to mind for you? What do we need to be aware of as sales professionals?
Oh, it's such a good question. So there's a couple parts the answer to this question, which is that you're going to have the content of a legal contract itself, but you've also got the enrollment process.
Yeah.
And so often, what I'm looking at when I am talking with business owners who either are their own salespeople or they've hired sales teams to do some of the sales work for them is, tell me about your enrollment process. Where do people start? Where do they hear about your business? Where do they learn about where do they intersect you? Like, is it live events? Is it online? Is it, where is it? And then talk to me about the process. How are you nurturing them into the actual enrollment conversation? And why that matters is because legal has to match the systems in the business. And sometimes those systems have to get cleaned up. So as much as I live in the land of law, I also live in the land of business systems, because when I see things not working or broken, I'm like, look, this is actually not a legal fix, it's a systems fix. Let's go look at your enrollment process and clean that up. And then let's come back and make sure that you've got documentation that supports that process, doesn't break it, doesn't intersect it in a weird way, doesn't surprise the client. So often it's a procedural or enrollment issue that can be problematic. And then of course the legal language itself matters. You have to have somebody drafting your language that understands your business, right? Because the other thing that I see often is people using business contracts that really weren't tailored or made for their business. And
Yep.
so they don't work well because they don't actually match, again, your business systems, your business process, even your language about how you might approach something. So there's a bit of digging into those business systems to help people have legal contracts, legal documentation that supports their entire enrollment process.
And I know you probably can't share like an example, but tell me what would what would the result be if all of what you said, we have those broken areas in our systems, we don't
Mhm.
have the contracts that are very custom to our business. What are some of the things that could potentially happen in our business if we're selling with those broken pieces in the process?
I'll give you a couple examples. So I had a gal come to me. She was actually a resident of China, but she'd enrolled in a very high-end business program here in the States. And it wasn't until after she'd enrolled and paid that she was given an agreement that were essentially the terms of the program.
Yeah.
And they included this very broadly drafted media release. So basically, if you're showing up to coaching calls that are in a group format,
Mhm.
they can use those recordings, reshare them, use them in marketing. So anybody that knows about cultural differences could understand why, like, somebody in China who's really working to build a specific kind of business might be highly uncomfortable with anything that they say about that business or about their own personal struggles being shared on, like, there's a big cultural difference there. In
Yeah.
addition to the fact that that process, like, technically it's a bait and switch. If you don't present your terms that are going to apply to that scenario before somebody gives you the money, you're like, there's no other way to say it other than that's unethical. You need
Oh,
people to come
yes.
in with eyes wide open, right?
Yeah, I promise you, there are thousands, if not millions, of people listening to this going, oh, because that's a very common practice. And a lot of the systems that most of us use it's literally like they get the payment first. And especially in sales, you want to get the money first, right?
Get
And then,
that commitment. That's
oh
right.
my God, and then you get the agreements and the
Mm.
terms. So you're telling me, and you're telling all of the sold out sales podcast community that we need to go back and take a look at our entire process to make
Yes.
sure that we have that very clear and present understanding of what people are going to be signing up for right up front. And you're absolutely right. A lot of us have those wide open media releases. It's like, yes, we can use your words, your likeness, your image, all those things online for marketing purposes. I'm so glad we're having this conversation. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
So there's a term that's called constructive notice. And what we're really talking about is achieving constructive notice in a way that is that functions correctly, right? It really does not do your business any good to create these scenarios where there's any doubt or confusion or impressions even left in your clients or your customer's mind that something didn't go quite right, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was interesting because I had a conversation the other day with a guy who he's actually fabulous. His tagline or business name is marketing for hippies. It's really mindfulness marketing, but going deep into this conversation around ethics, the ethics of how you handle your clients starting at the very beginning of the journey. So often we're taught sales strategies, marketing strategies that although they may work, right? Air quotes, work, meaning that they result in enrollment, they also might result in high refund requests,
Yeah.
unhappy clients, a certain amount of lost business or reputational damage. We have the opportunity to create businesses that are fully aligned and fully based on a deep exploration of our personal ethics and how we want to start relationships with our clients well before the actual enrollment. So I am saying go back to the beginning, right? And walk yourself through your own customer journey. Walk yourself through the process of like, how does this feel? What am I learning at each step? Like remove what you already know about your business and approach it with, new eyes. Does somebody have all the information they need to have at the point of actual enrollment to be a fully informed client? And if the answer is no, you go revisit that system and you build in steps that build an educated client, create that educated client, create an ethical balance and power between you and your client so that at enrollment, you guys are meeting as equals, not in this position of power or influence. Or often in sales, I think people are told, you have an obligation to convert these people because they need your help. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but don't set your personal ethics aside, right? You may really believe that and know somebody needs your help, but I think one of the things that I learned early on in my own business is it was much more important to spend that quote unquote sales conversation exploring, are we the right fit? Like here, let's start with that. Like I'm not trying to sell you. Let's just figure out if we're the right fit. And if I'm not, I'm very happy to refer you. And all it takes is working with the wrong clients before you realize like there is no other approach that works as well as letting go of the sales tactics and really looking at first, are we a fit?
Heather, you're giving a master class right now. And it's so great because I've been in business for almost 15 years. And I would dare say I've never heard anyone make this so clear and so plain. And the other thing that I hear you saying, and I think it's so beautifully powerful, how you talk about really wanting to make sure that not only is it the right fit, but you're willing to refer when it's not, so on and so forth,
Mhm.
because I think that there is a scarcity mindset that causes us to say, I got to sell this person right now. If I don't, they may not say yes. And there's a part
Mhm.
of us that's fear based. It's like, if I don't close this person right now, they're not going to come back. Opposed to, I have to be positive that they're the right fit, that I can truly serve them. And I'm willing to put that sale aside to make sure that my ethics are in place, my integrity is sure, and it also causes us to reduce the number of chargebacks and refunds and all those things and I don't think anyone is having this conversation. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. And again, myself included, I'm going to have to go back and look at all the things to make sure that the systems that are, in all honesty, that are pre-built, and I won't name all the names, but there's a lot of these systems that are in the CRMs, again, some of which I've used and teach, that are designed that way. They're designed to get the money first and tell them about it later. And so we've got to do things a little bit differently. Thank you so much. This is such a valuable conversation for every person that is listening today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Well, and you just raised a really important point about that fear mindset that can take over in the moment of meeting a potential new client. Like, oh, the time is now. If I let them walk out the door, they won't return or whatever. The question I would pose to anybody right now sitting with that thought is, have you looked at the opportunity cost of working with somebody that, although they might pay you what you're asking for that service, they are not going to shout your names from the rooftop because it is not an aligned fit.
Yes.
Right? So you're spending hours of your days working with people that, although they might be showing up, they might be generally getting the benefit of working with you. They're not the clients that you would fly out of bed for to jump on a Zoom because you're so excited to meet with them. We only should be working with those clients because those are the folks that are going to grow our business, are going to shout our names from the rooftop, that will feel that we are showing up fully to serve them, regardless of what your business is. And if you're listening, the difference between that kind of client. And maybe you can only count a few of those on one hand. That's okay. If you get really clear on your message, on what it is that your business does and who you're here for, you can work with those kind of clients who will dramatically boost your business compared to working with these other folks that actually become an opportunity cost for you.
Gosh, I had no idea you were going to drop so many amazing jewels today, but it's so important. I think that we take the time. I was talking with someone earlier today about becoming the person that you need to be in order to be able to serve at a really high level, right? And I'm just reminded of that fact. It's like taking a few steps back so that you can really spring forward and being willing to say no to the things that don't serve you, because you're absolutely right. I've had some of those clients that I'm just like, why are we doing this again?
Yeah.
Like, why did I invite them in? Because they're not ideal.
No, and even when they're paying your bills, there's a little bit of that crunch of like, oh, it's just not fun. It just doesn't light me up. And, if you've been in business any length of time, that feeling, because that's just part of the lesson that we get to learn.
Oh my goodness. So I've said this to just a couple of people. I'm going to tell you right now, you're coming back. We have to continue this conversation. There's probably way more that we can talk about as it relates to, the business of sales and the legal part of sales. And I'd love to have you come back. But I do want to ask you for yourself personally, because it sounds like you've got a really good handle on how you invite people in to work with you now, how you kind of determine if they're the right fit. But was that always the case? Can you recall ever having a sales flop? Maybe one of those times where either the person you really wanted to work with just didn't materialize for whatever reason, or they did and it wasn't the right fit for you.
I mean, yes, I would say definitely I've been through the experience of a sales flop. I would say early on, and I think this is very common for people starting out and just figuring out how to do the work, right? You just have to do the work enough to figure out what systems work for you, what clients you love working with, right? So early on, these were painful lessons when I had them, but super valuable from the standpoint of me getting really clear on my boundaries. I worked with a client who had a real estate scenario, and I would, give him my best advice. We had a series of meetings, and he would always come back with, yeah, but my Uncle Rick says do this, like something totally contrary or different or, completely the wrong answer. And I ultimately, not very far into that engagement, had to say, you know what? Like, you can't be my client. Like this is just not working. I'm going to have to let you go. Let me make a referral. Let's get you to somebody else who, will just be able to better serve you. And even those are painful conversations to have. I've learned that if you spot a mismatch early, the best thing that you can do is name it and deal with it. Right.
Oh,
And certainly it's happened, like I would say, even probably early COVID. I had a client that looked like an ideal client on the outside. Their business was ideal. The scope of the work was ideal. They had a wide variety of issues that are the kind that I deal with. And yet there was like this weird pattern of them like making me repeat myself and having multiple meetings about the same thing, where I was like, this is getting really cumbersome, and they're not fast action takers where it's a clear yes. And so even though it was probably a $20,000 client, I just messaged them one day and said, you know what, this isn't a fit. Let me refer you, because they showed back up for something else. And I was like, and I referred them elsewhere. And I've done that multiple times where those red flags pop up early. And usually I will tell you that one of my red flags that I learned to recognize is if a client was not immediately responsive, they reach out, I'm quick to respond, and they don't get back to me, and there's any kind of this drag in the enrollment process, it's a no for me. My people are catalysts. They know they need help and they're ready to start.
that. I love
So
that. Yeah.
that's going to be different for everybody, right? Not everybody works with catalysts. Some really work a lot more with relators. They want somebody who need the nurturing and that human to human connection. And I do that as well. But from a decision-making standpoint, I do so much better with catalysts that are action takers, and that when they show up to have work done, they're ready for it.
I love that. Well, my next question was, who are you uniquely gifted to serve? Obviously, Catalyst, but are there
Mhm.
any specific industries or place in business that someone needs to be at before they're ready to work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple ways to think about this. I'm uniquely prepared to serve those who care tremendously about their business. They know they're building the thing that is allowing them to do really meaningful work in the world. Those tend to be my people, right? So they're very mission driven. Their orientation is towards making things better for more than just themselves, right? Um, and I've built two different ways to serve those folks. One is the Legal Website Warrior, which serves a lot of folks kind of earlier in their journey, because I've got tools, resources, et cetera, that are super accessible, designed for, I call them information entrepreneurs, right? So a lot of consultants, coaches, online educators, agencies, they're really expert-based businesses. And then on the Pierce Law side, where I do a lot of my custom legal work, these are going to be businesses that are more in the $1 to $5 million range in revenue per year. They have a variety of legal needs that they need either catch-up support on or ongoing, kind of intermittent support, where it's almost like having a general outside counsel in place of in-house counsel, because they're not the size of businesses that actually can hire full-time in-house counsel, right? But they've got a wide range of legal needs, from IP to business contracts to online legal protections. So, I've got various ways of serving my clients, but they generally fall into those camps.
Wonderful. How would you like for our audience to reach you? We've already talked about the amazing website. Is that
Mhm.
the place, or is there someone somewhere else you'd like for the audience to be able to reach out to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So a couple places, go visit legalwebsitewarrior.com. That just from the standpoint of getting started with resources, again, that are really designed to help you very quickly get the lay of the land from a legal perspective in business. I've had people show up and go like, oh my gosh, I got lost in your website, like hours and hours of resources. And I'm like, exactly. You can do a lot for your business in a short time, but visit there if you're into somebody who like wants to learn about legal stuff applied to your business. Also, I've got a podcast, Guts, Grit, and Great Business. Come there because we talk about how to build businesses the right way, and businesses that are oriented towards longevity and being real, not falling prey to the get rich quick and some of the gimmicky things that you see in business. And then finally, LinkedIn. If you're on socials, that's where I do most of, my connecting. I don't do a lot of publishing on any social platforms. Like, it's just not where I spend my time. But you're totally welcome to connect with me there. Lots of great resources and articles that I've published on LinkedIn as well.
Wonderful. Heather, you have been amazing. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me here on the Sold Out Sales podcast. And once again, we will definitely, absolutely have you back. And I look forward to that time. Thank you.
Awesome, Tish. Thank you. It's so good to connect with you. I've really been looking forward to this.
Oh, likewise. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.